Good evening. This is John Warren, publisher of the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint newspaper, coming to you with our program from the desk of the editor. We're always happy to remind you that the Voice and Viewpoint is San Diego's oldest African-American publication, now in the 67th year, publishing on a weekly basis, available in print in 89 zip codes, 17 cities, unincorporated areas, online, at churches, retail outlets such as 7-Eleven, community markets, newsstands, and senior facilities. So we're just trying to live up to our motto. And our motto says that we are the voice of San Diego's African and African-American communities, and that a people without a voice cannot be heard. We're coming to you tonight with the program that's open mic. We are thankful for the opportunity to share this hour with Dr. Leonard Thompson III, our partner in this element of media communication. And so Dr. Thompson will tell you what social platforms we're on and how to contact us if you have a question, thought, or comment.
Well, good evening, everybody. So happy to be with you today. You know, after the election, so much is going on, and we have to be a part and ready to have the discussion. We are on several platforms tonight. We're on Facebook with GOD Radio, Facebook with Voice and Viewpoint, Facebook with Streaming on Demand, Instagram on GOD Radio, and we're also on YouTube on GOD Radio, and we are also on LinkedIn. So tonight we are broadcasting on 8 platforms, including our website as well as our app.
I tell you, we're really growing with this, folks. The Voice and Viewpoint has surpassed 10,000 in terms of Facebook followers, and TikTok is among the platforms that we're on. And if you should miss this program, it's archived at godradio1.com, and you can still pull it up. And so you can reach us. And Dr. Thompson will tell you how to get across a question or comment. We're going in at this from an open mic standpoint. Obviously, one of the main things still on people's minds is not only the California election, but elections that are taking place in other parts of the country. I am still very much concerned about the low voter turnout, the delays that we have here in terms of counting ballots, and some of the things that we see in terms of our election results. And I have some predictions in terms of how I think November is going to go based on what we're seeing today. So this is going to be quite an interesting thing. I guess you might want to start nationally, locally, and work our way up, or?
Well, you know, I actually want to go straight to the State Department and say, what is going on? And you mean to tell me I could spend over $200 million and still lose an election?
Yeah, well, you know, it just shows that I think people, as good of a person as Tom Steyer is, I think a lot of people, based on their encounter with Trump, are leery about having billionaires hold office, because there is obviously a feeling that when money is not an object, that you're looking for a kingship and not for an opportunity to serve. And unfortunately, it's a bad rep for Tom Steyer, who did spend over $200 million. I think we need to look closely, though, at a statement that was made with this election. Steve Hilton, with his British accent and his Trump support and his promise to cut programs and services, clearly, when you look at the map, the Republicans might be fewer in number in the state than Democrats. The larger party in the state is the Independents. And what we do see is a tremendous focused vote for this guy, which tells me a couple of things. That, first of all, California is more red than people want to believe, even though the Democrats outnumber the Republicans. And when we have this race in November in terms of the general election, I don't want us to assume automatically that we're going to win. All we have to do is have people stay at home, decide they don't need to vote. Steve Hilton can end up being governor, and that's going to break all hell loose, because all of the lawsuits that have been filed by Bonda and by Gavin Newsom in terms of fighting Trump and his attack on the state of California, cutting Medi-Cal, cutting all kinds of services, refusing to reimburse people in terms of the fires, cutting the emergency services. All of these things that have been done would be intensified with the support of Steve Hilton, who clearly thinks the way Donald Trump does, even though Donald Trump is on a major decline streak. Okay, and so this is important. Javier Becerra happens to be the great Democratic hope at this point. I mean, we don't have a choice. We either support him or we end up with Hilton. And Becerra, while he has a history from being Attorney General, Congressman, Secretary of Health and Human Services, if you look very closely at all of his campaign efforts, he has given very little attention to the Black community. And I think that's very significant. He came along at the last minute to do something with us, but that was just like kind of a touch bases, feel safe kind of thing. And so I think we have some great dangers here in terms of what's coming up. And I think we ought to be very concerned.
Yeah, I think it's very important that we don't fall asleep at this time thinking that because he's Latino, that the Latino vote is going to go to him and everybody's going to fall that way. Believe it or not, I believe there are a lot of Latinos that are very conservative and that they might get behind Hilton because, not San Diego, but California, we love stars. And if we think somebody has a star name like Hilton, like the Hilton brand and everything else of that nature, we vote on that Hollywood type thing at times. That's why we had Arnold Schwarzenegger and Ronald Reagan, both Republicans, run California because we were trying to find heroes. And my thing is that we need to find people that really are going to have the best interest of our state and our communities. And I hate to say this, but we as African Americans need to start speaking up and not just hoping that people are going to be with us. We need to know that they're going to be with us.
Well, you and I, we beg people to vote Dr. Thompson. And even last week when we had our post-election discussion, our numbers were down. People don't want to hear it. And this apathy, this indifference always leads to a reaction scenario when times get bad later as a result of poor decision making now. Okay. And I call it the 5 Ps. Prior planning prevents poor performance. And we're not planning right now for November. We're not making plans. We're looking at talking to people and everything is going to be okay. And we're not registering to vote and we don't want to vote, even though the Supreme Court gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act following the 2013 gutting of Section 2. And so the attack is on. And the only thing worse than the attack is the apathy that we are bringing as we watch our brothers and sisters around the country fall. Now, in November, I said before, we passed Prop 50, realigned some of the districts so that we could try to help add some more Democratic members to Congress. And so that was an important move on our part. We did that only because of Trump pushing the governor of Texas, the gerrymander, to try to add 5 seats there because he knew he was going to lose control of the House. Looks like he could lose control of the House and the Senate, which would be a very good thing. But we got to make sure that we don't just put people in office that are going to bow, because we cannot stop the Trump destruction of our democratic process without regaining control of the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is where the checks and balances initiate. The House of Representatives is where impeachment is initiated. Even though the articles are initiated there, the trial has to take place in the Senate. And so we know that this man has been impeached. This president has been impeached twice, but we couldn't go anyplace because he controlled the Republicans in the Senate. And whenever we had a tie vote, the vice president is the one that breaks that vote. And in this scenario, the vice president is J.D. Vance, and you don't even have to think about which way he's going to vote on any given issue. So these are some of the problems that we have.
You know, Dr. Warren, also we have to start looking at the demographics of California, the demographics of the nation, and see, is there really truly a voting bloc? We as African Americans, because we might be smaller, we are going to be a part of the decisive vote if we're collectively working together, because everybody is assuming that all the Latinos will go with Becerra. People are assuming that people are going to go with the Republican Party. There has to be a breaking vote. And I will say that it will be African Americans that will make the decision.
Well, not only is that true, Dr. Thompson, but I think people need to be reminded of a fact in terms of the Latino population. The Latino population, in terms of the census, is the only ethnic group that is subdivided into two categories. You have white Latinos and you have non-white Latinos. It's very interesting. And why is that? Because the non-white Latinos represent those Latinos that are of Spanish descent. And so they are the ones that are frowned on, that mixed Latino population. That's a mixture, the Indians, the poor Mexicans, the people that you see on the streets and stuff in Mexico, and who are not blonde, blue-eyed individuals. And so that gets to be a very significant move. And a matter of fact, one of the things, if you look closely, you see a large number of Latino women who dye their hair blonde. La Rubia is what they're called, the La Rubias. And that's all of that desire to try to be like that particular element. So yes, we saw in Florida that the Cubans who are Spanish speaking, many of them are ultra conservative. They pass for white and they vote white. Mm-hmm. And so we have a Chicano element and a Mexican element here, but we also have some Latino people who went through the process, got into the country legally, and resent folks coming here illegally and being lumped in and classified with them. So that gets to be a real issue.
Yeah, and so when we're actually moving forth and we're having these conversations, these are the conversations, I believe, Dr. Warren, that they used to have back in the day in DC, where people would get together and really have roundtables and talked about how are we going to effectively impact the next election. And it's more than just voting. It's really about understanding the issues so that as you're voting with the inference that it is going to literally help your community, your best interest, and this not the interest of the global. I don't see how anybody who's in the Republican Party can literally look us dead in the face at this point and say that Donald Trump, life is better under the direction of Donald Trump. Donald Trump said we should have never been in the war. He's gotten us into more wars. He's been blowing up more things. It's almost like he's a kid with a new play set. And I'm going to blow up this. I'm going to blow up that. Oh, let's try this. You know what? Let's do the drone vote. And let's do this and let's do that. Again, we have to really talk issues because, look, we have someone that is literally leading the country like a toy set.
Well, he's not leading the country. He's just watching the country and moving in any way that he wants to. He's really tired of the war effort. His attention span is so limited until I doubt if it can really make it to 120 seconds. And it was so funny when he decided to go to the Knicks game the other night and to see the people in New York boo him all along the street, to see the people boo him at the game during the playing of the national anthem. And they didn't stop until they took the camera off of him in terms of him just being booed. And then to watch him during the game sit there, go to sleep, because everybody knew he was going to go to sleep. Whenever he's sitting and he's not talking, he drifts off to sleep. And so you look at the federal judge made him take his name off of the Kennedy Center. The National Capital Area Capital Planning Commission, I believe, is trying to block the art that he wants to build and put his name there on that. And that's over. That's at that bridge crossing over to Arlington National Cemetery that he wants to control. That he wants to put his face on Mount Rushmore. Forget how long it took to carve those 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore. He think he ought to be number 5 up there, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And we've got people that 35% that's approving of him makes a very powerful statement. 35% of the population is controlling America through a psychopathic, comatose individual who cannot be removed because he has blocked all of the channels for removing him. Short of impeachment, Trump could be declared, if he was anyone else, he would have been declared mentally incompetent. And I think the 28 or whatever the number, not 28, but the vice president and the members of his cabinet could initiate a letter of removal that would go to the speaker. But Mike Johnson is a puppet. Mike Johnson is not going to do anything that's ever against what Trump wants. And so that's how we just got $70 billion given to Homeland Security. We've got the ARC, the UF fight that's scheduled there. We got the reflection pool being painted blue. We got the East Wing being torn down and rebuilt. And yet we didn't have enough money for daycare. We didn't have enough money for health care in terms of helping Americans. And we have been pushed into a war scenario that's raised the price of gas, that's put health at risk because of the impact of CDC, the withdrawal from the World Health Organization that's taken place so far. All of these things are going on to remove us from the national stage. We have China stepping in and doing more in Africa than we are. And they've been doing this for quite some time now, because the more they do, the more they improve their standing. And the Africans have no reason to be loyal to America over China when China is the one that's addressing their needs. China has financed a major dam in the past 10 years in Africa. China has financed railroad construction in Africa, and China has made a whole series of loans in Africa while we're just kind of sitting back. So this is important.
You know, Dr. Warren, that's I think very strategic. I know we started statewide and then we went to national, and now we're at the international piece. But I think that it's so important as we talk politics and we talk about what's happening in this day, that we can't just look at politics just from a local, a state, or even a regional, or even a national. We now, based on the leadership, have to really look at the politics worldwide and what is literally impacting us in the future. Because right now we're like saying, oh, we want to build relationship with here and build relationship there. But what we're finding out is that we're no longer wanted because people have stepped up and they've been more faithful, more just. And now they're like saying, okay, we're going to depend upon them.
Well, you know, Dr. Thompson, I believe it's going to take decades to repair the harm that's been done by Trump. Decades. It won't be, because first of all, America has the capacity to change directions every 4 years, while so many other world powers have systems in place that would never allow the scenario that we currently see taking place. You know, in the British, in the parliamentary system, and also under the Knesset in Israel, under these systems that they have, when one loses a controlling vote, they have to reorganize the government and call for elections and start all over again. Okay, and that's very important, because it gives other entities, they got to have so many people in a controlling factor in terms of what they do. Well, You know, we have gotten so used to democracy that too many of us don't even bother to vote. And the tragedy is seeing black folks that way when other black people in my generation gave up their lives for us to have the right to vote. You know, I was there when the Voting Rights Act was the one of the principal things behind the March on Washington. That's so significant. And here we are today, very thing that we fought for, we're not paying any attention to anymore. On May 7th, 1957, Dr. King gave a speech in Washington, D.C., and the name of the theme of that speech was "Give Us the Vote." And if you Google that speech and pull it up, and he says that if you give us the vote, we will elect the men and women of character that will make decisions for us. Well, you gave us the vote, we got the vote, but we forfeited the ability to elect people of character. We just let anything happen. Uh, we saw in 1964, I believe it was, the Reynolds v. Sims, one man, one vote Supreme Court decision that show how important every vote is. And yet today we just kind of sit back and it's very tragic the few people who voted in California when blacks in particular had a chance. So let's just jump from all of that. Let's look at some more races. I believe in Los Angeles that Karen Bass running against Raman, I believe Raman or whatever that's the sister that's running. I believe I predict that in November's general election that this lady will beat Karen Bass and she will become mayor of Los Angeles.
And your premise is what?
My premise is threefold, and one of the folds is looking at what happened in Texas with Al Green. They gerrymandered. Al Green was thrown into a competitive thing trying to retain a seat. He lost the primary to a younger black person that a lot of people felt more comfortable with, even though Al had been there for 20 years. So I think that this sister, who was at one point, as I recall, a friend and supporter of Karen Bass, and she laid out, I remember some time ago, she laid out in great detail the whole progressive scenario she went through that led her to disassociate herself with Karen and to decide to run. And it's not going to be a matter of a party race because that position is nonpartisan. Okay, and so this lady has the chance to be like Mondami in New York. She is younger, and she has pulled a vote. She has stepped into the number 2 slot. Okay, she's attractive, and some people gonna vote. They're gonna vote looks. They're gonna look at Karen, and they're not gonna stand there and reflect on, well, you did so much for the city. You represented us in the assembly. You went to Congress. You chaired the Black Caucus, and you did things in Cuba, and you were considered for vice president, but your Cuban ties blocked you from getting that. And so Kamala Harris got it. And people are not going to go through all that. They're going to take a look at her. They're going to look at the fires. They're going to look at all of the negative stuff. They're going to look at this younger woman who's got energy and ideas, and she's attractive, and they're going to vote for her.
Well, I think that the issue that's going to hurt Karen is definitely going to be the fires. I think that's going to be the number one issue that's going to hurt her. Number 2 issues is that a loyal friend has decided to run against her, and so that means that there's trouble in the camp. When your friend, your great supporter, comes against you, I think that people are going to say, well, if she came against her, maybe we need to look at her stronger to be a better candidate. And then the number 3 thing I think is going to be is because she is young and she's progressive.
Well, Dr. Thompson, I've been around political candidates and folks for the past 65 years, literally. And one of the things I've noticed that many times when people have served in office for a very long time, they begin to believe their own publicity. They begin to get comfortable All we have to do is look at the main situation and Susan Collins, who finally evolved to the point that now she is going to be chair of Senate Appropriations, which on the one hand would suggest that she's going to be able to bring all kinds of money home to Maine, pork barreling as we call it, but that the people that put this plant guy in on the Democratic side, and in spite of all of the allegations about his personal behavior and the promise of money from her, they are willing to forfeit that because of her relationship with Trump. And people are now looking at their wallets, they're looking at their dinner table, they're looking at their gas tank, and they're looking at all of the promises that they had, that we're not going to have any wars and we're going to bring down the cost of living, and the cost of living is going up instead of down. And so I think all of that's going to be a factor here, except I'm going to tell you what makes it so different and why Hilton did so well in California, because California is still basically racist. All right. A lot of people don't want to hear that, but it's still basically racist, but it's produced some racists who saw the light and made a difference. Earl Warren, I believe, was a Klan member at some point, but when Brown versus Board of Education went to the Supreme Court in 1953, Warren was not the Chief Justice. A guy named Vincent was the Chief Justice, and in September of that year, he had a heart attack and died, and Warren became the Chief Justice going into 1954. And so then we see the Brown's decision pass, and we see an evolution. All right. We had the same kind of evolution in Texas with Lyndon Johnson. I know I'm all over the place with this stuff, but history has a tendency to repeat itself. And so when people are complaining about California, you have to look at California in proportion to the rest of this country. California, if it was a country, I think it would be like the fourth largest economy in the world. And that's significant. It has more congressional seats than any other state, 52 congressional seats. That's a big deal in terms of it. And we grow everything here. And we have been the sounding board for so much in terms of innovation and ideas and things that are starting, okay? I believe that Schwarzenegger and Reagan won because they didn't win just because they were actors. I mean, they made movies for a long time before they ran. And I remember when Reagan ran, because he made a lot of Westerns, they suspended his Westerns during the campaign because somebody was alleging that playing his old movies was giving him an unfair advantage in the process, okay? And so it's time for us to make our statement, okay? And I believe that Black people in this state, even here in this county, where we're 6% of the county, 3% in the city, I believe that if our African brothers and sisters who are now citizens and can vote will unite with us, we could be a determining force. The point I started to make at the beginning of this little spiel that I'm on is that what makes the situation different with the anti-Latino vote in California is that the border is right here. We have the busiest border crossing in the world, right there at San Ysidro, all right? And we saw people with coyotes coming into the country every night, coming across the border, coming through people's yards and the whole bit. And so we don't want to see that. We saw May Day parades in the past in places like Los Angeles before this immigration move, where they were taunting the Mexican flag more than the American flag when you're right here in America. And people saying, well, if you feel that way, go back to Mexico, as opposed to trying to change this. But from the Mexican standpoint, their attitude is, this is our country. You took it from us. And in 1848, it was taken. In 1848, the Treaty of Hidalgo nullified all of the Spanish land grants and allowed whites to come in, take Texas, New Mexico, all of this land, that heretofore, if it wasn't a part of the Louisiana Purchase, it was there and it was grabbed and incorporated. Well, you know what? When you and I were going to school, a child could draw a map of the United States by hand in their mind and could identify the capital city in every state. I can't tell you how many people that I've seen have no idea in terms of the 50 states that we have, who don't understand why Washington, D.C. is a district and not a state, and who don't understand why we have Guam and Puerto Rico as U.S. territories, and don't care about why we're there, because we've become so self-evolved and connected to each other. Okay, so yeah, that's why it's a popular undercover red state, because people who deal with their Latino brothers and sisters and neighbors and smile and say, "Oh, I wish you well." Secretly, when they get a chance to vote, they don't want to see no more Mexicans coming into this country.
Yeah.
Unless they're people that are going to do, and the farmers are suffering. And it's so interesting because a few years ago, I remember that there was a group of Mexican farm workers who had green cards. And this might have been in the Biden administration, I believe. They came across the border. There were charter buses there to meet them, and the charter buses carried them. They had work contracts, and they talked about how they were going to work from like May until September. And when the crops were over, they were going back home, and they were here to make money and save money and send money home to help their families and to do that. Okay. Well, that's not a new idea, Dr. Thompson. Back in 1963, 64, 65, there was a thing called a Bracero program. And the Bracero program was a program that allowed people to come over, work, and go back home. Well, that was always in states like Florida. That had been happening for years. The people come from the islands, they pick the fruit, they make the money, they go home. Some people stayed, most of them went back home. Now we've reached a point where, like Germany, we didn't have too many people come and stay and illegally. And as much as we see the inhumanity of what Trump's doing, secretly, if Trump wasn't doing the rest of this stupid stuff, he would be applauded, because he stopped the illegal flow. I mean, people were coming through the Bering Straits by the thousands. By the time he started locking folks up and breaking families, they turned that boat around and everybody started going back and say, well, I can do bad where I'm at. I ain't got to come here to go to jail. So all of this is very real. And the last point I want to make on this topic, Dr. Thompson, you mentioned people meeting. When Joan Kropp built the Peace and Justice Center at USD, it was one of 5 such centers that I believe she built around the country. And in Washington, people still have these discussion groups, and they have them here. But I bet you that there has really been a time that our community reserved space at the Peace and Justice Center, which was designed for the kind of conversations that you're talking about, and that we would go there and meet with people, invite guests in and meet with people and have discussions about where we go from here. These are the kind of discussions that in my years in Washington, and when I was vice president of a policy institute, these are the kind of discussions that I would fly up to Harvard in the evening for dinner meetings with people who were in the past administration, and we would spend the night plotting what we were going to do when our element got back in power. And that it was not different from what the Heritage Foundation did with Trump in 2016, and then more recently with the Project 2025. There's always been this exterior planning for the next cycle in terms of being in office. We just don't see where the Democrats have done that kind of planning this time, knowing that they have a chance to take the power reins from Trump.
And I think that is the thing. I think that we have become very complacent and just assume that everybody's going to be dissatisfied. I was looking at a story this morning on the news, and the beef farmers are now saying that beef prices are so high that now the standard in Texas, especially in Houston, is brisket. And they said brisket has gone up to almost $60 a pound. And so the thing that used to be an easy brisket to feed people and people that now it is actually like almost like a fine dining cuisine. And they're saying that we are not making any money because the beef prices are so high, and it's all tied to the economy. And my whole thing is that a strong economy makes people go a certain way. A weak economy should make them go another way. And we should be able to see if we put up, and I'll say this pros and cons. Donald Trump did this. He stopped the flow of the immigrants. Do we like the way he did it? No, but he stopped the flow of the immigrants. So you can give him, he stopped the flow of immigrants. If you can give me one other thing that he has done to make America, quote unquote, more secure, or even in the sense of making our lives better. Everybody don't got a chicken in every pot. Everybody don't have a house. We can't even afford to drive now. I paid almost $8 a gallon for diesel gas. My whole thing is that life for me and for most of us is much worse off, but there's blinders on so many Americans that racism and hatred of people of color is more important than living a comfortable life.
Well, I keep saying that this 35% element has decided that racism is more important than democracy. And they're living it. You mentioned beef prices in Texas. They got another problem in Texas that's just as great. Canada recently barred all beef from Texas because of that worm issue that they found down there. And in addition to that, that and the tariffs that Trump keeps trying to impose and the courts keeps knocking down, the relationship that he's trying to destroy with Canada, the relationship he's seeking to destroy with Mexico, the embargo that he's done blocking gasoline and food and supplies getting into Cuba, the blowing up of boats, killing people with no regret in terms of what's taking place. All of this stuff is isolating America. And then he got into an argument recently with the Israeli prime minister. And that, because Benjamin Netanyahu has always said that when it comes to Iran, he wasn't waiting on no partnerships with anyone. He is right where he wants to be, bombing everything that's Arabic and looks like it might have any potential. And the reason that he does not want peace is because there's already charges against him in the International Criminal Court. And if he did not have a war like Trump that keeps that conservative Zionist element of Israel in combat, then he would be in jail. And as soon as this thing is over, he's going to jail. So Gaza scaled back. He had to start going after Hezbollah in Lebanon, and he had to make that a battlefield issue because he cannot afford not to have a war or go to jail.
Well, I tell you, we have a lot on our hands, but we have to have these real conversations. Coming back to California, I think about, the worldwide with China helping in Africa and doing things there. Are we now selling America out to the highest bidder? Because even here in San Diego, we see so much of the properties and the buildings that are being bought, sold, built are not owned by Americans anymore. How are we going to keep selling it to the point we own nothing in America?
Well, Dr. Thompson, you're about 50 years late. We've been selling America to people for longer than I can remember. And I can remember at least back 65 years. And we're one of the few countries in the world where you can come in from the outside and purchase property and virtually have free reign. If you go to Mexico and try to do that, you can't do it. You can buy, if you go to Hawaii, even because of what they did in Hawaii, you can get what they call a life leasehold, where you can rent property or you can own it for a period of time. But You cannot own it if you're not an Hawaiian. And a lot of that is the result of what the bishops did when they came. The Bishop family destroyed the place almost with smallpox, killed large portion of the population, and brought all kind of disease. The same thing was done here in America against the Indians, and um, I think it was the Crow tribe in particular. There were people as they moved into this country that were they had no immune system for the kind of diseases that came here. The people in Hawaii had no immune system for the diseases that the European sailors brought to the island and killing off so many of the people in terms of disease, and so this is all real, and unfortunately, and yes, this is ongoing. 25, 30 years ago, it was the Japanese that were buying up everything. They bought 7-Eleven. They bought Blockbuster. They bought 7-Eleven, Blockbuster. They own Union Bank until they sold it recently to U.S. Bank. And so, and then there was a China owning large segments of farmland here to the extent that it could have impacted our food supply. Okay. But at every instance, we have people in leadership. The great God served in America is greed. Greed is America's God. Capitalism is the child of greed. Capitalism is okay if you have capital, but for the masses that don't have capital, they have been sold on democracy as a substitute for capitalism, given a false idea that your numbers can make a difference when, in effect, even when you hold a presidential election, you're not electing the president with the popular vote. You're just setting things up for the electoral college to do it. So the country is based on a lie and hypocrisy, even though we have documents like the Constitution, the 13th, the 14th, the 15th Amendment, the Bill of Rights. All of those things speak to what should be, but the unspoken word is we only mean for it to be for certain people. It's kind of like Animal Farm. An Animal Farm, if you ever remember reading that story, the pigs tried to take over, and they wrote the following inscription on the barnyard door. They said that all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others.
Okay.
It's America. And democracy is okay, but for the wealthy, look at what Trump's doing with billionaires. He never met a billionaire that he didn't like, except the governor of Illinois, that is. But the rest of it, this is what he's doing. Okay. And so, and we're standing on the sideline, and there are 3 items in our arsenal that we can use to counter whatever amount of money. We saw that money could make a difference with Steiger in terms of $200 million being spent. And what are the 3 things that are respected? Okay. Bad publicity, lost profits, and votes that are cast against their interests. I don't care how big a corporate entity is in this country, it is vulnerable and susceptible to those 3 elements. And that's why in our schools, we do not teach government. We teach a watered down artificial sense of civics. We don't want people to understand how the process works. The people who come to this country and study to become naturalized citizens know more about the democratic process than the very people who are born in this country and given citizenship under the 14th Amendment.
Dr. Warren, I'm curious of how big is the financial divide and the gap between the haves and the have-nots since Donald Trump has been in office. I believe that there have been insider trading. I believe that there's been under the table deals. I believe that there are deals that Donald Trump has brokered around the world that we will be paying for and hurt for years. All the rules are being broken. Why he is taking the plane, why are we outfitting it, all of those different things is just totally unacceptable. The question comes down to it. Are we strong enough? Are we bold enough to say enough's enough and vote our interests for the success of us?
Well, we'll know that in November, and we won't know before November because I don't think the Republican Party will ever find the balls to do anything about him until they are voted out of office. And right now, they're being impacted. We see two things happening. We see what happened with Steve Hilton in California, where the endorsement of Trump is like the secret go ahead. Okay. We see what happened in Texas, where the failure of Cronkite to get the endorsement of Trump and to put an attorney general who had been impeached, like Trump, who was an adulterer, who was surrounded by graft and corruption, to see him become Trump's pick over his Republican colleague, because once you cross him, you become a target. And so this is what we're seeing. And he has violated with the plane, he violated the emolument clause. The emolument clause makes it clear that any gift that's given to you while you are a sitting president or official, you could be a secretary of state, people are always exchanging gifts. Those things belong to the people of America, to the U.S. government, and not to the individual receiving those things on behalf of the government. That's the truth of the matter. And what do we see? We see Trump. He never saw a gift that he didn't like. He's probably going to pardon the Bitcoin guy who's serving 20 years for with his conviction. And we're just waiting to see how long it's going to be before he lets Charlene out of jail as Epstein. And Trump has used this war effort to divert attention from the Epstein matter.
Most definitely.
Okay. And so when John Ossoff, sitting senator and candidate for re-election out of Georgia, referred to the ballroom, he called it the Epstein Memorial Ballroom.
Yep. Yep. Oh, we got a question that came in.
Yeah.
It said, I read something that said it is the job of Caucasian American to realize racism still exists and to change it, not the job of Black America. Until the realization happens on a greater level than it is right now, what do Black Americans do in the meantime to get the point of equity?
Well, let's say something identifiable about racism, okay? Because first I want to establish that it's not just white people that can be racist, all right? Black people can be racist. And racism is applying a stereotype standard to people based on how they look without knowing anything about them, just assigning the negative and being in a position of authority and oppression to act out that application. That's important. We got a whole bunch of people that are racist that look like us. I'm not going to call the names of folks, but we got some people here from a number of African countries who do not like Black Americans, who dislike us and disrespect us, and yet they are in effect guests in our country. There was a time in Washington, D.C., and now it can't happen because of the way that the airports are set up. But there was a time in Washington, D.C., if you landed in D.C. at that airport and you tried to catch a cab to Southeast, and most of the drivers were African, they wouldn't take you. They say no. Now they don't have a choice. They have to take you wherever it is, whether it's the Maryland or Virginia. You indicate which side you want to go. That's where they send you, because otherwise they will be barred from being there. So let's understand that it's not just white people that can be racist, and Black folks are racist. Black folks is interesting because in spite of the right that we have to respond to all the hatred that we get, we are still the noblest, most caring, most giving, most sharing people on the planet. You know, if you watch a movie that involves a white person that needs help and they come into contact with a black person, even if that black person has an issue, they're going to try to find help because that's in our DNA that we are, for the most part, respectful and helpful. And so, what we can do in terms of the caller, we can first examine ourselves. We can decide that we're going to treat people the way we want to be treated. That's first and foremost. And that we are not going to be a genuflect reaction to what we receive. Because if we did that, it would be a lost cause. There are people that want us to respond with hatred so that they can be justified in terms of what they want to do against us. We can't afford to play into that. That's why the whole civil rights movement was so successful. That's why Gandhi was successful and King was successful, because they knew we couldn't win by force, but by absorbing all that we did in a nonviolent manner, we won because people finally got to see the atrocities that being directed at us without us responding the way they themselves would have responded. And that's important.
Well, Dr. Warren, I look at racism a little bit different. I believe that racism can only take place if you have the power to institute over people. So, yeah, there are Black people that have chosen to use their power and their economics to change systems and laws that literally become racist towards African American people themselves, although they might be African or African American. But racism is founded in my premise that you have the ability and the power to force those laws, put Jim Crow, things of that nature. Now, I believe everybody can be prejudiced. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But racism has to be where you can actually implement, be able to implement your hatred.
Well, how are you making the distinction between racism and prejudice?
I'll say that everybody prejudges, no matter if you black, white, purple, or green. We prejudge based on what car you drive, where you live, and everything else. We have something to say. But when you say racism, you're literally able to affect. It's like when you go there and it said black only, a drinking fountain, white only. That couldn't happen unless there was laws that could be put into place and the powers that be were able to get it done.
Well, let's take that a step further briefly, Dr. Thompson, because what happens is in order to be comfortable with your hatred of another person, you must first dehumanize them.
Mm-hmm.
And so racism dehumanizes by taking away from the victim the same rights that the perpetrator has. And therefore, the perpetrator feels justified in terms of what's being done. And so those are things that we need to look at. And in many instances, we're our own worst enemy because, we've been so programmed to doing ourselves in that sometimes we don't need any help from other people.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're gonna argue with each other. San Diego, how many times in the past 40 years that I know of here have we tried hard to unify people, to bring us together in terms of discussion, and even when they have a meeting talking about unity, I've sat in the room and watched people in the room who aren't speaking to folks in the room and don't intend to speak to them no matter what's said in the meeting. Okay, and meanwhile that plays right into the hands of people who would love to see us not come together. That's why I've spent so much of my time trying to unify the Black community and the African communities, and I've had resistance from both. The Blacks don't want to necessarily bother. Many times it's religion-based because so many Africans are Muslim and so many Blacks are Christian, but they should be able to overcome that in terms of coming together. Very difficult. And so it's a challenge.
Well, like we always say, Dr. Warren, that we don't have all the answers, but we do need to be the change that we want to see. It starts with each and every one of us, and we have to start with ourselves first. So I always see, what the Bible say, while you trying to get that little splinter out of somebody else's eye, first remove the log that's in your eye. And so I think that as we begin to look forth into this election season, moving forth on trying to make impact in our city, our state, and our nation, we're going to have to literally not just point the finger at everybody else, but look at what we need to do individually, then collectively on how we can make a change. Dialogue first, you know what I'm saying? But action most of all. And the one actionable item that everybody could do is they can get out and vote.
Well, Dr. Thompson, before we go off the air with this, I want you to take a moment again to remind people of how important the event is that's coming up on the Midway. I think it's critical. Next week, we're going to have all kinds of Juneteenth events. It's a national holiday. We're going to discuss Juneteenth. We're going to talk about it here. And it becomes a real sad scenario that we are celebrating a freedom that's being abused by the very people that it was intended to set free. And I'm very concerned. We want to encourage you to still read, visit our e-blasts, our websites. We're putting up stuff constantly. Share your ideas, your events, your information with both Dr. Thompson and myself so that we can still reach a broader community. We still have some people who think that San Diego didn't exist until they got here. And therefore, what the rest of us are doing just don't count. And so we just got to help them understand that's not the case.
Well, my slogan is always going to be, we are stronger together. And we want to make sure that we invite you all out to Bayside Gospel Concert aboard the Midway. It is taking place on July 11th, 7:30 on the flight deck of the USS Midway. This year, it is about celebrating women, and we're going to celebrate 8 powerful women from our community. All the artists that are coming are women this year, because we want to just celebrate the women that have been doing great works in our community and also impacting the world. We're going to share more about that the next time we get together, because Dr. Warren, guess what? We're out of time.
We are out of time. And Dr. Thompson, before the screen goes off, I would like to be able, while I'm sitting here and we're winding down, I want to be able to go back and read some of the comments because I couldn't get a chance to see them.
All right. Well, I'm going to make sure I'm going to leave them all up.
All
so
right.
that you can
Good.
see them.
Okay.
All right.
We love all of you, and be blessed out there. Put the Lord first in whatever you do. You in our prayers, and we win.
Together. Y'all be blessed.